Hello, guys. Welcome back to Southern Gal True Crime. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first time here, welcome. We are so glad to have you here. My name is Dawn. I share missing persons, cold cases, current true crime in the news, and more. Today is our case of the week, which ties into the fellow I'm going to be talking about today in the case of the week. Ties into the Missing Person Monday video that I did this week. So if you have not checked that out, if you want to pause this video and go watch that to get the background information on all the missing persons that I featured in the Missing Person Monday video, it is linked in the description box. Because in all the missing persons cases that I featured this week on my Missing Person Monday video, there was one name that came up in all 5 of the cases that I shared. So I got to researching this fellow and found out some very interesting stuff about him. He was, like I said, he was named as either a possible suspect, person of interest in all the 5 missing persons cases that I featured Monday. And after I started researching him, I found out a lot of very disturbing information about him. So that is why I decided to make him the subject of my case of the week. This case of the week is going to be a little bit different from the ones I usually do. I'm going to give you some information. I found some very interesting information about this guy. So I just wanted to share it with you. There has been a detective that has been working, investigating this possible person of interest, suspect, and possible serial offender. So I found a lot of good information, and I will give you the sources for the websites that I use, the sources that I use for this information, and also they are linked in the description box. Like I said, some very disturbing stuff about this fellow, and this detective that has been working on this case, I believe for 12 or more years, has made some connections to all these 5 missing ladies. So I will bring the information to you and let you decide for yourself. This is a premiere video, so the chat box is available. I will be in the chat with you guys to discuss this case, to answer any questions or comments that you may have. So let's get into it. Before we get my slides going, I always feature a missing person at the beginning of my videos. So today, I think I have an Amber Alert and a missing person. So the first missing person that we have to share is Trancity Mays. She went missing from Fort Smith, Arkansas on January 31st, so almost a month now, from Fort Smith, Arkansas. She's just 16 years old, a black female, 5'7", 175 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen in the Fort Smith, Arkansas area, but she may be staying in the area of Marianna, Arkansas. So if you're in the Arkansas area around Forest City, Marianna, and if you have any information about her whereabouts, possible situation, please contact the Fort Smith Police Department at 479-709-5100. Why is this not? Sorry, I'm having trouble with my slides. This is an Amber Alert. This is Minnie Hughes. She has been missing since February 22nd, 2024 from Houston, Texas. She is just 12 years old. She is a black female, brown hair, black eyes, 4'6", approximately 100 pounds. She was last seen wearing a white crop top, pink joggers. It said that she left the location in a dark colored 4-door pickup. So call 911 with any information. And it says that the Houston Police Department continues searching for Emily. She may be on a social media app known as Tagged, and she is believed to be in the Missouri City area, and that was an update. So if you have any information, call Houston Police Department Missing Persons at 832-394-1840. All right, so our case of the week is going to feature Christopher J. Belo. So is he a possible serial offender, or is his possible connection just a series of unfortunate coincidences? And when I give you this information, very interesting, very compelling. This detective that has been working on this case has done a lot of good research, a lot of good detective work, and has made some, in my opinion, some plausible, possible connections to the 5 missing persons that I had shared in my Missing Person Monday video. So who is Christopher Belo? He was born in Henderson, Kentucky. Of course, he's a white male. It says offender type is suspected serial offender. He has been convicted of one attempted involuntary manslaughter, and that the one he was convicted for is one of the missing persons that from the Missing Person Monday video from Monday. Says his criminal penalty is unknown. In the I believe in the conviction that he got, or he had pled, I think he pled guilty to it. He was sentenced to, I believe, to 11 to 18 years for that crime. He has definitely one victim, possibly up to 5 victims. His span of crimes could have possibly spanned from 1986 to 1998, all within the United States. And he was apprehended in 1991. So just a little, for anybody who hasn't watched the Missing Person Monday video yet, this is just a little bit of information about the 5 missing persons that were featured. I started with the Shailene Farrell case, and it snowballed from there. And that's how we're here today with this Case of the Week video. So Shailene Farrell was last seen leaving her family's residence in Pequot, Ohio at approximately 10 a.m. on August 8th, 1994. She just went out to run a quick errand to buy a bottle of Lipton iced tea at the nearby Pick and Save grocery store. And apparently she had been working part-time there for 2 weeks before she disappeared. She went out to run this quick errand. She never returned home, and she was never seen again. Next, we have Mary Cousteau. Mary was last seen at Cindy's Lounge in St. Cloud, Florida at approximately 1:30 a.m. on May 5th, 1998. Before that, she had gotten into an argument with her boyfriend. She left the lounge. After that, she was never seen again. Now, on this one, red flags with the husband. So her husband, Guy Tuck Cousteau Jr., reported her missing on May 29th. So she went missing on May 5th. He did not report her missing until May 29th. He had apparently went to this Cindy's Lounge where she was last seen, and he told the bartender that his wife was missing and, quote, had probably been SA'd or is somewhere deceased. So I find that very red flaggy. I mean, if my spouse went missing and I was out looking for him, that the way that he stated it, that would not be the way that I would state it. But people are different. I would go in and say, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is the description. Have you seen her since she left the bar?" But unfortunately, this is the statement he made. So please, you guys in chat or watching replay, please let me know what you think about this very strange statement that Mary's husband made. Next, we have Christina Porco. Christina was last seen leaving her family's residence in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina on November 29th, 1986. She had an argument with her mother during the evening hours about her curfew, and apparently she left the house at around 10:30 p.m. Christina called a friend from a nearby phone booth afterwards and asked if she could spend the night with a friend. Now, the friend's mother would not let her spend the night, and Christina said that she was going to just go back to her apartment and sleep by the poolside. So apparently, the apartment she lived in had a pool, and maybe they always had the lounge chairs out there. So I'm assuming she might have was just going to sack out on the lawn chair and then get up in the morning and go back to her apartment and try to smooth things over with her mother. During the conversation with this friend, she mentioned that a taxi had kept passing by her, driving very slowly. So that's a red flaggy. Her friend went to the pool shortly after talking to Christina on the phone. She only found Christina's red sweater by the pool area. Christina was not there, and Christina has not been seen or heard from since. Next, we have Heather Teague. So Heather's case was an observed abduction. So Heather was sunbathing at Newburgh Beach in Henderson County, Kentucky, on August 26, 1995. A witness was observing the beach area through a telescope from across the Ohio River, and this was at approximately 12:45 p.m. The witness told authorities that he saw a Caucasian man approach Heather at the time. The abductor allegedly grabbed Heather by the hair, dragged her into the woods off of Newburgh Beach at a gunpoint. The abductor was approximately 6 foot, 210 to 230 pounds. He had brown hair, and it says a bushy brown beard. He was wearing jeans. He did not have a t-shirt on or any kind of shirt on. He was also reported to be wearing a wig and a mosquito net. And I'm not sure what they mean by mosquito net, possibly something that goes down and covers the face or the hair at the time that he abducted Heather. So, and I will have, when we get into this possible person of interest, possible serial offender, I have do have a lot more information about Heather's abduction. Hold it, my slides are getting out of order. Sorry, guys. Okay, so that was Heather. The last one we have is Catherine Fetzer. Catherine was last seen in her home on Lafayette Road in Medina, Ohio on May 26, 1991. She had left a note behind for her husband of 5 years saying that she was restless and was going to a local mall to window shop. Now, apparently, when she left, she did take her purse, but she did not take any credit cards or anything of that nature with her to shop, although it does say that she was going to window shop. So she might not have been planning on buying anything. She never returned, and she has never been seen again. All right, so now we're going to kind of delve into the person of interest, the possible suspect in all 5 of these cases that I just mentioned is Christopher Belo. And Christopher has a very troubled, very disturbing background. And I found this article. It's by Gina Mace, and I will put a link to it in the description box. Just gives a little bit or a lot of good information about his background. Just for you guys to get a feel of what this character is all about. And Christopher Belo is the suspect that was mentioned in all 5 of these missing persons. So Christopher was born in Lorain, Ohio. He was raised in Kentucky. It says that he was the product of an unhappy marriage that his father called the biggest mistake of his life. So we start out right off the bat with his father saying that this was the biggest mistake of his life, Christopher being born, or maybe the whole situation and with the marriage with the mother. So right off the bat, very unfortunate situation. So James Belo, who is Christopher's father, was served divorce papers in boot camp while he was preparing to ship out to Vietnam. And at that time, Christopher was about 1 year old. His so James's mother, Dorothy, told their son that his father was deceased. So I don't know. I'm assuming that this was some point after the father had gone to Vietnam. The mother said, "Hey, your father is deceased." Don't know the reasoning behind why his Christopher's mother would uh, say this about his father. And it wasn't until years later when the father showed up on Christopher's doorstep back from the war, um, wanting to visit. That Christopher was 5 years old by that time, that Christopher discovered that his father was not deceased. So, that had to have an effect on him. He had gone all these years, basically 4 years, 5 years, thinking that his father was deceased, and all of a sudden his father shows up on his doorstep. But unfortunately, this was the last time that the father and son would be together in a dozen years. But it was also a moment that Christopher Belo would later recall in a drunken rumination, they say, as an experience that scarred him. So apparently, this reunion with his father, or the first time actually meeting his father, because he was 1 year old when his father went off to Vietnam, so he probably had the limited memories of his father. But he does say that this experience of meeting his father when he was 5 years old, after all these years of thinking he was deceased, scarred him. So another piece of the puzzle of Christopher's troubled life. So eventually, Chris's mother remarried to Thomas McDaniel, and it says that Thomas and Christopher did not get along. And as a teenager, Chris was sent to live on a farm with an uncle named William Jellybean Oglesby. Doris McDaniel, Chris's mother, explained to detectives later that her son had a hard time adjusting to the large high school in Henderson, Kentucky, and the farm in nearby Dawson Springs offered him an alternative. But Christopher would tell the same detectives that Uncle Jellybean, as he called him, was the only one who ever loved him. So apparently, Christopher had in his mind that his dad went off and abandoned him, or for all 4 years, he thought his father was deceased, according to his mother. Apparently, he didn't have a very good relationship with his mother. And this farm that he was sent to was situated in the western reaches of the state, not far from where the Ohio River separates Kentucky from Indiana. Family members said he loved to roam around on the farm, the countryside, and it was there that he came of age. He smoked substances by the age of 12, and they said that this was a precursor to the substance and alcohol abuse that was to come. So in time, Christopher's boasted of military exploits became common ploys for him to pick up women. But the truth was far less enviable, they say. So he told stories that weren't true about his supposed adventures, as they say, or experiences in the military. He had joined the Army after graduating from Union County High School in 1985, but he was only in for less than 2 months because, according to the investigative file, he developed an inflammation beneath the skin, which was an ailment called cellulitis. So from what I understand, I've heard of cellulitis. I worked in the home healthcare industry for 10 years, so I've heard of cellulitis. It can be painful, but it's not serious. So years later, Christopher's stepfather would tell detectives that his stepson, Christopher, called home often during his Army days to report a rash of injuries from basic training. But when they visited him at the base, they found his only wound was a foot blister. So maybe Christopher, in my opinion, maybe was looking for a way to get out of the Army, out of the military. After the Army, Christopher drifted from job to job. He worked at factories. He drove trucks. As late as 1991, he tried to rejoin the military, this time the Marines, but records show that he failed again, and he never made it through boot camp, or he never made it to boot camp. So apparently after he applied to join the Marines, he changed his mind once again and didn't show up. Sometime in the late 1990s, Christopher, and this is getting into some of the more disturbing things, so trigger warning. I'm just going to say trigger warning for this whole video. So sometime in the late 1990s, Christopher had a tattoo put on his chest depicting two women. One, it said, was pretty with long dark hair, and the other one had horns. Now, according to one of his many police interrogations, Christopher explained the significance of this tattoo in this way. He said, quote, "This is the way women are." The detective recalled him saying, "When you meet her, she's all nice and sweet, and later she turns into a blood-sucking," you can read the word on the screen, I can't say it out loud. So apparently, in the 1990s, or all the experiences that he had with women had led him to believe that when he's basically saying when you first meet them, they're nice and sweet, and then later they turn into, in his opinion, not so nice. So this is the first of many disturbing facts about Christopher Belo. Melinda Bass, who is one of Christopher's half-sisters, had offered him refuge. She allowed him to stay at her home in Indiana, and she said that women's attraction to him was well established. So apparently, women were drawn to him for one reason or another. She said, the half sister said, he could sell a woman with white gloves, a ketchup popsicle on a hot summer day. So apparently, he could sweet talk women. In my opinion, just from this statement, in my opinion, I would think that he would be very manipulative. He knew what to say to the women to get them to try to be with him, possibly. But despite Christopher's apparent confidence, the half-sister said her brother would rarely zero in on the best-looking women in the bar. So I found that interesting. She went on to say he could not deal with rejection. He would say, "I can't handle being turned away." So in my opinion, if all the things that we're going to get into later are true, this comment that he made, that he cannot handle being turned away, rejected, could possibly be one reason that he could possibly, allegedly, I have to say allegedly, because nothing has ever been proven except in one case, that he had anything to do with any of these missing persons. That this perceived rejection from women be just one of the factors that may have led him to possibly being a serial offender. But definitely let me know in chat or in replay what you guys think about that. There were numerous girlfriends between and during Belo's 4 brief marriages. According to several of them, he would move in, promise to pay the bills, buy cars, care for these women, but soon he would abandon them, leaving them emotionally and financially drained. So he would sweet talk, manipulate whatever woman it may be, promise them all these things, paying their bills, buying cars, caring for them, but didn't last long. Once again, I think he's a manipulator. In my opinion, shows uh, narcissistic traits, sociopathic traits, but this is just my opinion. And so these relationships with these women, and apparently with these 4 brief marriages, as I say, didn't last very it says that he had a habit, they said, of running up thousands of dollars in bills for calls to, I can't say the S word, to these lines, call-in lines that were popular back in the 80s and 90s. This was an item that seemed to go along with his peculiar and voracious appetite that many claim did not stop with women. Now, this is all alleged. All this information is coming from women that he had relationships with. According to them, they said that he had a penchant for three-ways. Let's put it that way. I don't know if I can say the word on the slide. Three-ways. And that an intimate encounter that would involve, well, we all know what a three-way is. So I won't go into any more detail on that. Sally Bowman, now of Ashland, said that Christopher charmed his way into her life after he split from his third wife. This was only 5 months after the disappearance of Catherine Fetzer. We will get into Catherine's case. At the time, she said, he was always very nicely dressed. He always looked nice. His hair was combed, very clean. She says he had a way about him, she insisted, that shouted a Southern gentleman. So being from the South, I'm from Arkansas, I understand what she means by saying the Southern gentleman. But Bowman said, in a Christopher's more odious mode, he suggested that she have intimate relations with her then 17-year-old son. So once again, trigger warning. Apparently, Christopher suggested that she have relations with her 17-year-old son. Of course, obviously, she had said, no way, not doing that. And at another point, he brought another man home from a bar so the 3 of them could have relations. So we're starting to see this, the more information, all this information is building on top of each other, getting continually worse, escalating, very disturbing. So that is why this detective that we're going to talk about later here in a little bit is has a suspicion, very strong suspicion that Christopher was, which is as far as I know, still in prison, a serial offender, showing all the classic signs. He is apparently a sexual predator. I might get flagged for saying that, but that's the only way I can put it. So very, very disturbing information. His drinking grew into a significant problem, according to one girlfriend who said he lost 2 jobs because he did not show up for work, and he was frequently drinking while driving. That's never good. Go back to Melinda, his half sister, also became aware of what she termed his Jekyll and Hyde personality. She said, quote, "You had to walk on eggshells around him. I consider him a ticking time bomb. It was like someone would flip a switch and he would become a different person." So once again, she mentions Jekyll and Hyde personality. Could be possible he had some kind of bipolar disorder or schizophrenic. This is just my uneducated opinion. But once again, you guys let me know in chat or on replay what you think. The pressure brought on by the investigations showed not only in Christopher's emotions, but in his appearance as well. Outwardly, he would alternate between an attractive, confident man sporting a cowboy hat for a photo that he passed out to lure women. So now he's passing out photos to try to pull these women in. And that would alternate into a strung out looking mountain man with unkempt hair and a scraggly beard. There was one thing, though, they say that Christopher couldn't hide by altering his appearance. And this was a peculiar genetic quirk that gave him a distinct look. When resting his hands at his sides, his arms were bowed and his hands turned in awkwardly, so his palms faced backwards with his thumbs against his thighs. Such a distinction had little relevance until 2003, when a Medina detective, and we will get into this detective, desperate for a revealing glimpse of Christopher's history, he began poking around the Kentucky countryside of his childhood, searching for the possibility of a similar unsolved crimes. He said it was a long shot, but then suddenly in the file of an 8-year-old Kentucky case came a hint of something familiar. A young woman had vanished without a trace, dragged away by a bearded, long-haired man who had a noticeable physical quirk. The palms of his hands turned awkwardly inward. So, this detective that we're going to talk about, I believe his name is Thomas, Detective Thomas, remembered, as all good detectives do, remember, remember details about different cases, about different suspects, put two and two together, and in his opinion, he put this together, and a light bulb went off in his head, and he started. That's when he really started investigating Christopher. Okay, so the next information that I'm going to bring to you is from, I found this website. It's called Hunter Abduction Response Team, or a HART for short. And this is where the poster, whoever posted this information, and I did vet this website because I'd never heard of this website before. I try to vet all my sources that I use to make sure that the information comes from credible sources. And this website uses, I think it was the Beacon Journal website news agency news, which is a credible news source. And the person that posted this information uses the username The Tracker. So I just wanted to give credit, and I will put a link to this whole. I'm just going to read some excerpts from this. It gives a description of some of the crimes and how they're trying to connect, possibly make connections between Christopher Belo and these 5 cases. So it says this information is coming out of Medina, Ohio. For more than a decade, Detective Scott Thomas and his colleagues have been investigating Christopher Belo, a native of Henderson, Kentucky. So some of the names that are going to come up in the course of what I'm going to share with you, of course, Christopher Belo, a Lodi man who had an affair with a 26-year-old Catherine Fetzer before her disappearance in November of 1991. Heather Teague, a 23-year-old former cheerleader, last seen struggling with a man August 26, 1995. on a beach along the Ohio River near Henderson, Kentucky. Tim Walthall, he is an Indiana businessman who witnessed the abduction of Heather Teague. Later identified, he was the one that was, I think I mentioned earlier in Heather's case that this was the witnessed abduction. Tim Walthall was the person who witnessed this abduction through a high-powered telescope. Where you're also going to hear about Marvin Ray Deal. He was a Kentucky man who took his own life as police closed in to question him about Heather's abduction. We're also going to hear about David Shows. He is also a Medina detective. He is now retired. He became convinced that Christopher Belo was an offender, possible serial offender, and he tracked him for 11 years as Christopher moved around the country. Of course, we have Catherine Fetzer, a Medina factory worker who vanished November 26, 1991, after telling her husband she was restless going to the mall. She's the one I mentioned earlier. She was going to go to the mall to window shop, but did not take any credit cards or any money with her. And then we have Detective Thomas. He's the main driving force in putting this information together about Christopher Belo. So he is a Medina detective. He took over the department's decades-old investigation of Catherine Fetzer's disappearance when Detective David Shows, I mentioned earlier, retired in 2002. So I just want to kind of give you, I'm going to be naming a lot of names, so I just wanted you to have a little idea before going into it about who these people are and how they fit into this case or this theory. So this article that I found was from 2006. So when it says last year, it's meaning 2005. So last year, Detective Thomas got Belo to confess to the 1991 homicide of his Christopher's lover, Catherine Fetzer, for which he is currently serving time. But the detective suspects that Christopher may have also harmed other women over the years who fit, a certain profile. Both Catherine Fetzer and Heather Teague, the young lady abducted off the beach, had dark hair. They were around 5 feet tall and weighed around 100 pounds. Detective Thomas told Newswatch, quote, the Heather Teague case was interesting because Christopher was from the area. Detective Thomas was able to establish a time frame that he was in that area at the time, and that shortly after her disappearance, he left the state of Kentucky. So after Heather Teague was abducted from the beach in Kentucky, Christopher Belo left the state. Could be something, it could be nothing. This is just one of the pieces of information that Detective Thomas has put together along with a lot of other information trying to possibly connect Christopher to these cases. Detective Thomas says that the more that he dug into Christopher's life, the stranger it got. Yes, it does get very strange. And he calls Christopher a pathological liar, a sociopath, and an extreme manipulator. So that is what Detective Thomas has to say. Some of the things that Detective Thomas has to say about Christopher Belo. So, Kentucky State Police say a Henderson native who is currently behind bars for taking the life of a young woman in Ohio has become a person of interest in the Heather Teague case. They say there have been many, quote, people of interest in the Heather Teague case over the course of the 9-year investigation. One stands out in particular because of his violent past and his whereabouts at the time of Heather's disappearance. Only a detective in Ohio, Detective Thomas, was willing to go on record to talk about the possible connection. And go back. So, I'm going to give you the information about the Heather Teague disappearance. So Heather Teague disappeared while sunbathing on Newburgh Beach in Henderson County 9 years ago. Now, Kentucky State Police are taking a closer look at someone they're calling a person of interest. Kentucky State Police say a Henderson native who is currently behind bars for taking the life of a young woman in Ohio has become a person of interest in the Teague case. They say there have been many, quote, people of interest in the Heather's case over the course of the 9-year investigation. One stands out in particular because of his violent past and his whereabouts at the time of Heather's disappearance. And only one detective, as we mentioned, Detective Thomas, and was willing to go on record to talk about the possible connection. It took a detective in Medina, Ohio, 12 years to get a Henderson, Kentucky native to confess to the homicide of a young woman named Catherine Fetzer. It took another year to bring that man to justice, but this detective says his work is not over. All right. So 4 years earlier and 450 miles away in Medina, Ohio, 26-year-old Catherine Fetzer, who you see there on the slide, left a note for her husband that said that she was feeling restless and needed to go to the mall. She was never heard from again. The investigation led to Christopher Belo, originally from Henderson, Kentucky. He was living near Medina at the time and working with Catherine at a factory. He was reportedly having an affair with her, but denied any involvement in her disappearance. Medina City Police Detective Scott Thomas did not believe it. Over the next 12 years, Detective Thomas continued to track and re-question Christopher as he moved from state to state. In the fall of 2003, Belo had returned to the tri-state, living in a home in Evansville's west side with a woman and her 5 children. Evansville police detectives joined Detective Thomas on November 18th when they knocked on the door and asked Christopher to come downtown to talk about an unrelated case. Inside, Detective Thomas confronted Christopher with new evidence in the Catherine Fetzer disappearance, and Christopher finally confessed to using a firearm. He was eventually extradited to Ohio, where he made a deal with prosecutors to plead guilty to a lesser charge of man and is currently serving 11 to 18 years in prison. Through all this, Catherine's body has never been recovered, unfortunately. It says that Christopher would have gotten less time if he would have led police to Catherine's body. But all he would tell them is that she would never be found. So he was not apparently interested, as all these, in my opinion, alleged serial offenders, narcissists, they don't care. They're not interested in trying to give the families of these victims any closure. So he never opened his mouth. Detective Thomas says he does not believe that Christopher disposed of Catherine's body in a dumpster as he initially confessed. He says in the past, Christopher had bragged to friends that he knew how to, quote, get rid of bodies. And his philosophy was, quote, no body, no crime. So you can see, in my opinion, and please, once again, let me know in chat that's watching now. And if you're watching on replay, leave it in the comments. I told you guys, this guy is a real piece of work. So those statements prompted the detective to start looking at other missing persons cases, especially those whose physical descriptions were similar to Catherine's. And that's when he started looking into the disappearance of Heather Teague. Detective Thomas says Belo would have had the opportunity for involvement because Christopher was living in Henderson in August of 1995 when Heather vanished. And since Henderson is where Christopher grew up, it is likely he knew the only suspect in the case, Marty Deal. So this is Marty Deal that you see here on the slide. So Newburgh resident Tim Walthall, who is the one who witnessed Heather Teague's abduction, has always contended that this Marty Deal is the man he watched through a telescope drag Heather off the beach at gunpoint. Heather's mother, Sarah, has always suspected that the composite sketch was drawn to match Marty Deal's picture rather than the eyewitness accounts of the actual abductor. Now, whether Christopher is connected to Deal or the disappearance of Heather is something investigators plan to ask him as he sits behind bars in an Ohio prison, serving an 11 to 18-year sentence for the homicide of Catherine Fetzer. Detective Thomas says because Chris worked as a truck driver for some time, he may have ties to other missing persons cases in other parts of the country also. And we will go into these other cases. So just a little, really quickly, timeline of events that could possibly give you an idea of how they're trying to connect Christopher to these other cases. In 1990, Christopher moves to Ohio to be closer to his truck driving roots. In the summer of 1991, Christopher begins an affair with Catherine Fetzer, a married Medina woman. In the fall of 1991, Catherine has second thoughts about the affair. Christopher buys a firearm on November 9th, 1991 at a Medina gun show. November 26th of 1991, Catherine Fetzer disappears and is reported missing by her husband, Michael. Her locked abandoned car is found the next day south of Lodi. Catherine, as I said earlier, has never been seen or heard from again. August of 1994, Christopher moves back to Henderson, Kentucky. July of 1995, Christopher moves to Mount Vernon, Georgia with Helen, who is his fourth wife, along the Ohio River. Oh, hold on. July 1995, he moves to Mount Vernon, Georgia with his fourth wife, but returns to Kentucky 2 weeks later. Got ahead of myself. August 26, 1995, Heather Teague is abducted from Newburgh Beach in Kentucky along the Ohio River. 3 days later, Christopher abruptly leaves the area and heads back to Georgia. 1996 to 2000, Christopher lives in Georgia. He is working as a truck driver, traveling to North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, and Louisiana. In August of 2002, Medina detective Scott Thomas starts noticing the similarities between the disappearances of Catherine Fetzer and Heather Teague. So we'll talk a little bit about the Heather Teague disappearance, witnessed abduction. So after Heather Teague disappeared along the Ohio River in 1995, police thought they had solved her homicide. Then they heard about Christopher Belo. Tim Walthall never met Heather Teague, yet their lives intersected on a warm sunny day in August of 1995 in a horrifying moment that passed without significance to anybody in faraway Medina County, Ohio. It was a perfect day for the blue-eyed, long-haired former beauty queen to find a secluded spot to work on her tan. She parked her red compact car. Make sure she parked her red compact car at Newburgh Beach on the Ohio Kentucky side, on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River near Henderson. She walked through a stand of willow trees. She walked down a steep bank. She put her lounge chair along the water's edge. Along with the sounds of the river pushing over the nearby dam, the 23-year-old removed her cut-off shorts, placed them by her shoes on the sand. She lay down on her stomach. She loosened her bikini top to work on her tan, not having any tan lines. In Indiana, across the wide, expansive river, Tim Walthall, who is the owner of a metal fabricating company, has strolled over to a wall of windows in his riverfront home. His wife was making lunch at the time. Tim had noticed that the thermals, which they say are visible airwaves created by the differences in air and river temperatures, were non-existent that day. So he picked up his binoculars to take advantage of the clear view, which I say was a mile or so across the river. So he had a started out with binoculars. He will eventually switch to a high-power telescope, so he had a very good view of the beach, had a very good view of Heather, and a very good view of these events that took place during her abduction. So he picked up his binoculars to take advantage of the clear view, and he spotted 4 ATV riders making their way over the sand dunes on the distant shore. Walthall remembered watching them as they cleared a dune not far from the remote spot where Heather could be seen sunbathing. As the last of the vehicles turned away from the beach, though, Walthall also caught a glimpse of something peculiar. He said that somebody's head popped up from a clump of high dense weeds, which was only about 15 feet behind Heather. Walthall watched, as did the man in the weeds, as the ATVs passed from sight. Puzzled by what he was seeing, Walthall opted to get his more powerful telescope for a better view of what he called the long-haired, bearded man as he inched his way toward the unsuspecting woman, who is Heather Teague. Walthall said the man would take 5 to 6 steps, then crouch again down in the weeds. He said, quote, "I told my wife somebody is stalking that woman." He said, "I thought maybe it was her boyfriend trying to scare her." And still not fully comprehending what was unfolding before his eyes, Walthall said that he saw the man take 4 or 5 giant steps, kneel down by the woman, put his arm across her back, a move that triggered a sudden struggle. For a moment, Walthall thought perhaps the sunbather knew the man because she stopped resisting briefly when it appeared that this unknown man was talking to her. But his worst fears came to be when the man grabbed the woman's long brown hair, twisted it around his hand, pulled her head back, and yanked her off the chair. It says during the skirmish, her top fell off. As she tried to retrieve it, he could see that the man had a small silver handgun. Suddenly, Walthall was stunned not only by the gravity of the moment, but by the frustration of his predicament. So being in Indiana, while witnessing this crime taking place across the Ohio River in Kentucky, so the witness, Mr. Walthall, was in Indiana. Across the river, this is where the crime was taking place in Kentucky, a different state. He watched helplessly as the woman, eventually identified as Heather Teague, was led away from the river and into some underbrush. As the bushes on the shore shook back and forth, marking the spot where she struggled, Walthall was pleading with an Indiana State Police dispatcher to give him a phone number so he could alert the Kentucky police about this situation. Then came his challenge to persuade the Kentucky authorities that they had an emergency on their watch. And all told, it was 26 minutes before Kentucky State Police arrived at the beach. And by that time, both Heather and her abductor were gone, unfortunately. So it was a very, and I'm not, by no means faulting police. They were doing the best they could to try to get this information from Mr. Walthall about what he was seeing. We all know it takes time to get the information, find out what's going on, get the location, and to get somebody out there. So we fast forward. So by the time Christopher Belo was willing to confess that he took the life of Catherine Fetzer and supposedly left her body in a dumpster, Detective Scott Thomas knew there was much more to the story than Christopher was telling. Thomas just did not know how much more, and he still doesn't, he says. For years, those who investigated the Catherine Fetzer case were bothered by not knowing how much significance they should place on an item that was found months after Fetzer vanished in November of 1991. An item Christopher left behind in his abandoned Lodi apartment. Whether by accident or design, Christopher had left a briefcase with a 5-year-old South Carolina poster that sought the public's help in learning the whereabouts of Christina Joanne Porco. So Christina, they discovered, was a petite 16-year-old girl, long dark hair. Once again, long dark hair. She had been missing since November 29th of 1986. She had left her home in Hilton Head, South Carolina, following a quarrel with her mother. This is the one that ended up sleeping by the pool in a lounge chair. She had called a girlfriend asking to meet her in the pool area of the complex. When this friend that she called arrived, though, Christina was gone, and all that remained was Christina's red sweater. After that, she was never seen or heard from again. Why her missing poster was left in Christopher's apartment is unclear, but it was among the first of many hints that led police to believe that Christopher Belo might be a serial offender who collected souvenirs from his victims. And all his victims, once again, petite women with long dark hair. And in fact, Melissa Motioner, who is another one of Christopher's half-sisters, she had opened her Evansville, Indiana home to Christopher in 2000. She told police about a shoebox of treasures that her brother always kept with him. She said, quote, he pulled out the box one time and said, quote, if anything ever happens to me, hold on to this. So apparently this box of treasures or whatever it may have been was very important to him. So the half-sister said that the box contained an assortment of, once again, trigger warning. This box contained an assortment of letters and nude photos of his ex-wife in Georgia. It also contained some trinkets of jewelry and a ring that he said he got from an uncle. But according to her recollection, the half-sister's recollection, it also contained flyers for 5 or 6 missing women. Once again, all petite with long dark hair. Detective Thomas said he had long been puzzled by photographs of Christopher taken over the years in which he noticed that Christopher appeared to be wearing women's jewelry. So possibly not only was he possibly collecting souvenirs from these possible alleged victims, keeping some things in a box, apparently he had a penchant for wearing some of the women's jewelry. Now, whether or not it was jewelry from possibly these victims that he might allegedly have had a hand in, we do not know. It just said it was a women's jewelry. But at any rate, food for thought, very interesting. So police are still looking for this box. When Christopher discovered Boschner, the half-sister, had been snooping, he transferred the contents to another box, and this box had a lock. It was a lock box, and he took it elsewhere. And the search for the box took Detective Thomas back to Evansville, Indiana, where he and Evansville Detective Dan Winters conducted a search of another girlfriend's home and a storage unit on December 8th. But the elusive box, unfortunately, was nowhere to be found. Instead, though, Thomas discovered a certified mail receipt that seemed to add to the mystery. So according to this certified letter, or receipt for a certified letter, it allegedly placed Christopher in St. Cloud, Florida during his travels in 1988, which was about the same time a woman by the name of Mary Cousteau, who you see on the slide, vanished after leaving a local bar. After 6 years, the case had remained unsolved, and Mary Cousteau was never seen again. So Detective Thomas says, quote, unless you find something to physically put him there at the scene with one of the abductions, you cannot offer him a deal. He won't confess. So apparently Christopher Belo was in custody while they're finding all this evidence, possibly linking him to these other crimes. Like you said, unless you find something physically to put him there, if you bring it up, he's going to deny it. He says you can't offer him a deal. He's not going to confess. So they're kind of in a limbo situation. And so therefore they're going to try to find, if there is any, try to find more evidence to link him to these cases. So Christopher Belo is in Marion Correctional Institution doing time for the taking the life of Catherine Fetzer. He avoided a trial and the possibility of life in prison by agreeing to plead guilty in September, and this was in, I believe, 1991 or 2002. He pled guilty in September to a single count of attempted involuntary the man charge. I can't say the whole word or YouTube will flag me. His sentence was 11 to 18 years. To this day, though, he never has said why he took the life of Catherine Fetzer. Police never believed his story that he put her body in a dumpster. They have no proof of what happened to his vehicle. They are suspicious, though, of a place in Kentucky, a place along the Ohio River where locals used to dispose of junk vehicles by pushing them into a deep pocket of water carved out by the force of this winding, apparently it's a deep, winding, wide river, fast current. They said, but that was 13 years or so ago, and this deep pocket that for a while was a handy, if questionable, dumping spot has since been filled in by the waters and the silt and the dirt and everything that is deposited in the flow of the water. It is less than a mile downstream from where a large metal cross is sunk into the sand to memorialize the spot where 23-year-old Heather Teague was dragged away on the otherwise perfect day in August when she was kidnapped while sunbathing on the side of the river. So this cross was put there by Tim Wathel, who is the man who observed Heather's abduction. It is one of a number of items he paid for. He also paid for psychics and search teams in an effort to discover what happened to Heather, who was abducted while he watched with the telescope from the other side of the river. After all these years, his eyes still fill up as he speaks of it. He says, quote, I felt I had an obligation. I feel the good Lord let me see something for a reason, and that was to let me help solve this thing, what happened to Heather. It is only a theory that the disappearance of Heather could have been the result of Christopher's yearning for, once again, a three-way involving what they say another man. It says that his penchant for such encounters was no secret to the women in his life. Furthermore, he was in the vicinity when the abduction took place. He fit the description of the abductor and another male suspect, Marvin Ray Deal, whose car was linked to this abduction. He took his own life when police moved in to question him. Medina attorney Robert Campbell, who represented Christopher in the Catherine Fetzer case, said his former client has steadfastly denied having anything to do with the disappearance of Heather and never mentioned any other cases. Of course, he's not, in my opinion. Nonetheless, law enforcement's interest in the strange secret life of Christopher continues. In November, Lieutenant Bob Bromage from the Sheriff's Office in Beaufort County, South Carolina, made the trek to Marion Correctional Institution to question Christopher about the 1986 missing person poster for Christina Porco, who disappeared from Hilton Head Island. Bromage left saying there would be more questions. He said Christopher was, quote, still a person of interest. Evansville detective Brent Melton, who tried to get Christopher's cooperation last year, which would have been around 2002 or so, 2002 to 2005. He tried to get cooperation last year on Heather's case when Christopher was arrested in Catherine's homicide. Said he was struck by Christopher's failure to seize an opportunity to deny involvement in Heather's case when the opportunity was handed to him. So this Detective Melton said, quote, I told him the girl's mother, meaning Heather, was losing her mind over her daughter being missing. I told him she wants to know what happened. Melton said he suggested to Christopher that he could blame Heather's abduction on this Marty Deal, once again, the suspect who took his own life when police approached. Melton said, quote, I said he could say Marty Deal did it. I said he could say Deal forced him, Christopher, to participate. I told him it would look good in the eyes of the court. Melton paused, recalling the conversation. He said Christopher responded, quote, I see your point. Melton said I was accusing him of homicide and he never denied it. So that's telling, in my opinion. Detective Melton went on to say, quote, just his reaction, I can't explain it. It gave me chills. And just looking at that picture there on the slide, the eyes say a lot. James Belo, who is Christopher's father, James Belo's eyes brim over when he recalls the happier times 2 years ago before his son's arrest, when they worked for the same trucking company, father and son passing each other at work, offering each other friendly waves as they started along their routes. The father said, quote, I still see the truck he used to drive every day, and I expect him to be in it. James Belo is the man his son once called his rock, his path to a new start and a new life. Quote, he said he'd finally found his family, the 60-year-old James Belo said. Quote, what hurts me the worst is the way he deceived the family, especially his half-sisters, who looked after him and loved him. The sisters have long since kicked Christopher out of their lives after they say they found him in a compromising position with a child. So Melinda Bass, once again, one of the half-sisters, said, quote, "I grew to hate him. I don't really claim he's my brother anymore." James Belo, the father, said his heart goes out to the survivors, and he notes, quote, "Not only did they lose a daughter, but I lost a son." At 67, Betty Tipton, Christopher's mother, has come to, no, Betty Tipton is Catherine Fetzer's mother, says that she has come to terms as best she can with the notion that her daughter, Catherine Fetzer, will not be coming through the front door anymore. Like other such survivors, she has no grave to visit, only a small memorial garden in the backyard of her tidy Medina home, full of more than 200 angels collected since Catherine disappeared. Tipton was there last September in Medina County Common Pleas Court when Judge Christopher Collier sentenced Christopher Belo for Catherine's homicide. Watching Belo utter his one-word answers tested her. She said, quote, "It took all my strength when I saw him in court to not go up to him and wring his neck." She said. So the question is, were all these ladies victims of Christopher Belo? In September of 2004, Christopher was charged with the homicide of Catherine, who had been missing for nearly 12 years. He admitted to dumping her body in a garbage dispenser in Ohio after he took her life. It said that Catherine was trying to end an affair that she was having with Christopher at the time. Christopher is now a person of interest in Heather Teague's abduction. Christopher is said to have had acquaintances that were related to Heather Teague, and the fact that he was living in the same area with that Heather lived in at the time of her 1995 disappearance. After doing some research of some other ladies who are missing, make sure I didn't, no, okay. Sorry, let me go back. After doing research of other ladies who are missing and some found deceased by homicide, and this is Detective Thomas, I believe, talking. He says, "I found that there were two other," or maybe this is the writer of this article, says, "I found that there were two other ladies in the southern Ohio and northern Kentucky area who could quite possibly be linked to Christopher Belo. These ladies lived in the area where Belo was at one time, and all of them have an eerie resemblance. There has been no evidence to support this theory, but it has been sent to Detective Scott Thomas, who did crack the Catherine Fetzer case. Is it possible that Belo is responsible for more disappearances and homicides?" These are answers that hopefully can be answered soon. So the two women that whoever wrote this article is questioning is Alana Laney Gwinner. She disappeared from a bowling alley in December of 1997, located in Fairfield, Ohio. Her body was later found in the Ohio River in January of 1998, and to date, her homicide is unsolved. The other one in question is Erica Lee Frazier. Erica vanished in Brooksville, Kentucky, almost on the Ohio state line, on October 21st, 1997, 2 months before Laney Gwinner vanished. Frazier's vehicle was later found abandoned, like Catherine Fetzer's car. Erica has never contacted her family since that date. She is still currently classified as a missing person. She was also only 17 at the time of her disappearance in 1997. So it says in this article, now we are forced to ask how many of these victims can be laid at Christopher Belo's feet. The real trick is finding out exactly how this offender disposed of his victims. The garbage bin story from him, he's in his opinion, is not likely. If one of these victims is located, then his MO can be deciphered and used to find the others. Hopefully, he will tell law enforcement exactly where one or more of his victims are. Criminals only tend to change their ways of doing things after they are caught or come close to being caught. Therefore, hope now exists for closing the cases of his other victims. So that is the case of, or taking a look at Christopher Belo. Just want to make sure that I didn't skip any slides. Yeah, I think I went over all the information about his previous life. So the question is, like I said, the question is Christopher Belo possibly tied to these to these 5 disappearances that I talked about in the Missing Person Monday video, and to these other 2 young ladies? Like I said, as of now, there has been, just want to reinforce, there, in all these cases, except for the Catherine Fetzer case, which Christopher Belo was convicted of, in all these other 6 missing persons, there has never been an official, he has never been officially been named as a person of interest or suspect in any of these other cases. But this detective, Scott Thomas, has done his research along with other, I believe it mentioned that David Snow or David Show, who started putting this together initially, and then he retired, and Detective Thomas took over from there. Lots of compelling information in these cases, and I think I do have a couple of articles I'll read very quickly. So this is in connection to the Catherine Fetzer case. It comes from Cleveland19.com, and is from September of 2004, and it says, man pleads guilty in disappearance of woman 13 years ago. A man who has pleaded guilty to an attempted involuntary man in the nearly 13-year-old disappearance of a woman whose body was never found. As part of a plea agreement, Christopher Belo, 38, avoided a trial and the possibility of life in prison. He was sentenced to 11 to 18 years in prison after pleading guilty in Medina County Common Pleas Court to the man charge and a firearm violation. Catherine Fetzer, 26, of Medina, was reported missing November 26, 1991. She had left her husband a note, said she was going to the mall. Police believe Fetzer and Belo were factory co-workers having an affair. In statements made to police after his arrest in November, Belo said that he took Catherine's life with a firearm. Police Sergeant Scott Thomas said Belo claimed Fetzer, quote, played head games with him regarding their relationship and finally pushed too far. So he is victim blaming. Police said Belo has been a suspect since the beginning and gave conflicting stories about his relationship with Catherine. Detectives had tracked the truck driver for years throughout the South and the Midwest. He was charged in November after another series of police interviews and was extradited to Ohio. County Prosecutor Dean Holman said the plea agreement ensures ensures a conviction and prison term, a trial without a body or a no body trial could have resulted in a different outcome. Holman said that Christopher insisted that he had no idea where the body can be found because he supposedly disposed of it in a dumpster. Holman said, quote, "I don't hold out any hope in ever finding that body." So that, unfortunately, Catherine's body probably will not be found. Feel very sorry, as always. So sad for the family of Catherine and all these other victims, no matter whether Christopher Belo had anything to do with it or not. But at least Catherine's family did get some measure of justice, because he was Christopher Belo was, or did, plead guilty and was sentenced to 11 to 18 years in prison. I think I have one other short story regarding, I think, Heather Teague. If I can get it to come up. Yes, so this comes from WEVV 44 News website, and it is from January of 2024, so not too long ago. It says a reward has been donated anonymously to help find Heather Teague. After decades of no answers, an anonymous donor has stepped forward offering a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Heather's disappearance. On August 26, 1995, 23-year-old Heather Teague disappeared. She was last seen on Newburgh Beach in Henderson County. The case has been open since that day, 3 decades ago, 30 years ago, where it continues to remain an unsolved mystery. Sarah Teague, Heather's mother, says, quote, "I know there's answers out there and I just want to know where she is. I want to bring her home, even if it is just a piece of her." The family only waits for the day all of their questions will finally be answered. Her mother says the most important part is keeping Heather's name alive. Absolutely. That's why you can see up in the top right-hand corner, hashtag never forget. We never forget any of these victims. That's why I do this, is to keep their names out there, keep the awareness out there of all these victims and missing persons. Her mother goes on to say, as hard as it is, it's been 28 years, 5 months, and 4 days today since Heather was taken. And to submit a tip about Heather's case, you can call 270-836-7643. So that is that is our case of the week. Thank you, everybody who joined me in chat. Thank you, everybody who will be watching the replay. If you're watching the replay and if you have any questions about this case or comments, please pop them in the comment section when you watch the replay. And once again, thank you to everybody who is watching. If you found this video interesting, helpful, informative, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, like, share, comment. All those things help small channels like mine reach more people to get this very important information out to as many people as possible. You can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. I do post things in the group and the page that I do not put on here on YouTube, so definitely check it out. If you ever have any questions or comments, you can contact me at the email address you see on the screen. Or you can put comments in the Facebook group or the Facebook page. If you have a case that is dear to your heart, Maybe you knew the victim. It happened in your hometown, your home state, or just anywhere. A case that you know of that you think is not getting enough attention, or you want more awareness brought to it. Email me the details, the victim's name, the state it occurred in, any information that you have about it. Email it to me, and I will do my research to the best of my ability, find all the information I can about it, and I will feature it as the case of the week or include it in my missing persons, either a video or a live stream. That is what I'm here for. So please send me that information. If you would like to help support the channel and the search for the missing, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. I have a PayPal Me account. I now have a Venmo account. You can donate through Venmo. I just set that up last night. I have Southern Gal True Crime merchandise. So if you would like to donate, please do so. All these links can be found. I will put them in the description box, and they can also be found in the About section of my page. Let me take the banner down. There we go. All right, guys. Thank you once again for watching. If you were in the chat with me watching the video premiere, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you're watching on replay, thank you so much. I also appreciate that. Put any questions or comments in the comment section. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take care of your fellow human beings. That is the most important thing we can do. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.